Now, for the second panel session, we're going with a slightly different twist to the first panel session, and we're looking at innovation from a different angle. We touched on it a bit in the first session, inevitably, but we're looking at that consumer client angle. You know, what do the public want? What are the challenges around helping people get access to legal services? And can legal businesses trying to tap into, we know there's a big unmet legal need out there, how can they tap into that? And we've got a great panel to talk through those issues, so let me introduce them. So next to me, first we've got Daniel Clark, who is JMW's Director of Marketing. He's been at the firm for 2 decades now, and it's quite interesting because you're a marketing professional, but who's risen up to be, I think, a partner at the firm. So I think I'm looking forward to some interesting and insights and tips on that side of things, and particularly around sort of digital marketing and how you reach new clients. Next to him, we've got Alison Lobb, who's a managing partner at Moorcrofts here in Liverpool. I think she has more than almost 3 decades worth of experience as a solicitor, has a really impressive CV of roles outside the firm, including being a president of Liverpool Law Society, and she was also a trustee of North Liverpool's Citizens Advice for many years. And then next to her, we've got Nyan Lee, who is a director and senior solicitor at the Vauxhall Community Law Centre, just down the road, one of the country's oldest law centres. And previous to that, she helped build the Greater Manchester Law Centre. And previous to that, she specialised in welfare benefits, working at Stevenson's Solicitors. And then finally, we've got Salim Arif, who's the co-founder and chairman of the website Review Solicitors, a review site that works with more than 2,000 law firms. And previous to that, he was the co-founder of Quality Solicitors and was involved in the rebranding of 400 firms under that brand. So it'll be great to hear Salim's insights, although in the interests of fairness, I probably should say there are other comparison websites out there. And actually, one of the things we've been doing at the SRA, a bit like I talked about the unbundling pilot earlier on, we've been running a pilot involving 8 different comparison websites and I think more than 70 law firms. And that is to look at how comparison websites work. We think they may be useful for people in being able to choose a solicitor to look at reviews and things, but they haven't really kicked off in the legal sector. And there's also risks around that, such as, you know, fake reviews or whatever, and we might get onto that in a bit. So just a heads up, that pilot is something we're doing. And actually, if you're a firm thinking, actually, I'm quite interested in how I can get involved in that type of pilot, that pilot's still ongoing, so get in touch with us if you want to get involved. So let's crack on with the questions. Similar format to the last one. I'm going to ask some questions and then nudge the audience to try you to ask some questions as well, so get thinking. But the first question I wanted to ask, and I'll move along the panel, so you're first. I suppose I wanted to ask a general question. What do people want when it comes to legal services, and how do you think consumers choose legal services? So, Daniel.
Yeah. I think a consistency of service, consistency of advice, delivery, and elements of transparency. I think they're the key points that we look at JMW in terms of how we approach what people want. I think there's an expectation when people engage you for a legal service that the service is going to be premium, and I think they expect to receive a premium service, but there's also an element that they will be paying a premium price for that service as well. So it's thinking about how you actually deal with that inquiry when it first comes into your practice, how it's dealt with. Do you have service levels agreements? We have that. We have an inbound call centre that takes all the leads that come into the firm, and we make sure that first touch point is critical, and it has to be. Certain work types have certain service level agreements where it has to be 10 minutes and they're speaking to a lawyer to ascertain whether there's that matter can move on. But I think that first touch point is huge for people. If you think about Disney as a brand and you think about that magical experience that they give to anyone that visits any of their parks or watches any of their films, I try and relate that back to what we do as well. I don't think you ever hear anyone say they've had a bad experience at a Disney park or watching a Disney movie.
We'll test in the audience whether anyone's had a bad experience. Thank you, Alison.
Yes, I think we're probably going to all say something along the same lines, but I think it's very important that whether they're individuals or businesses, what everybody wants is to be looked after and to feel that they can trust their advisor. And I think we're all offering legal services, and the differentiator between us has to be the service rather than the legal, because we can all do the law stuff. The consumer has to be able to see, actually, I want someone to look after me, to help me on my journey. And it is these days, I think, far more about the client experience and the client journey with you, because the majority of people who come to see a solicitor for the first time come because they've got a problem, not because it's nice. You know, take out the you're buying a business or you're buying a house, but most other people are coming, it's a distress purchase. So the first thing they want is to know that they're going to be able to trust and that they're going to be looked after.
I think that's a really good point. Trust, it has to be vital. Nine, what do you think?
Yes, similar to Alison and to Daniel. We've got a slightly different perspective in terms of our client, because our client's one of the most vulnerable when they contact us. So really, it's the point of contact that we try and get back to them as soon as we can. It's more than just the service delivery. It's trying to know that they can talk to us about any of the problems, and we can try and unpick it. Just because obviously we provide free legal service doesn't mean it's poor. It's still up to high quality. We're still up to the Law Society accreditation. So really, it is about the client journey. It's about supporting them through that process. And it's just access as well. We've been closed our premises have been closed for the pandemic. They struggled to get in touch with us. We've reopened, and they're knocking at the doors, can you help? And just being there for the local community.
Yeah, thank you. And Celine?
Certainly what we think people are looking for is comfort, reassurance, that somebody actually cares. I think that's really important, that you've found a solicitor who actually cares about you as an individual, is empathetic to your needs, and is there looking to solve your problems, and is speedy. I mean, certainly from review solicitors, the complaints that we typically get are to do with the person wasn't really bothered, he was trying to just sell me a service without thinking about my particular needs. So I think you want somebody who is really there for you and is there to reassure.
No, I think that's really interesting, and that actually chimes with the SRA did some research a couple of years ago, and one thing that was quite interesting about that was it looked at what consumers want and what law firms think consumers want, and the research showed that law firms, and this goes against what you said, but I think you're right, Alison, was law firms thought the outcome was the most important thing. Do I win? Do I complete? Do I get that done? And actually, of course, that's important to consumers, but actually communication and that building that relationship came out as what consumers said was number one. And I do know, if we have the legal ombudsman on the panel, they would say the most complaints that end up at their door, often it comes down to that communication. So I think what everyone said there really resonates with that. In the last panel, we touched a little bit on sort of changes in consumer expectations because of COVID, but I wanted to ask, do people think both COVID, but also perhaps over the last decade or so, do you think consumers' expectations have changed and shifted in that time? Does anyone want to kick off on that one? Otherwise, I'll choose somebody. So it's not fair to come to you first, so I'm going to go back in reverse order. So Celine, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Things have changed a lot in the last 10 years. The prevalence of smartphones, I think it's like 80% of adults have a smartphone now. And people have expectations that they can find information when they need it. That information wasn't so readily available. But, if I'm thinking about using a particular solicitor, I can just type in their name in on Google and see what comes up. I think people are perhaps more demanding of what, in terms of legal services. And just simply, they expect to be properly looked after. It's not something that, as it was, say, a decade ago.
No, and I mean, obviously, you've got a bit of a different perspective because of the types of users, but have expectations changed?
Absolutely. So we've during the pandemic, I issued staff mobiles to all our staff members. and people are using their mobiles, you know, they're texting them at 11 o'clock at night saying, I've got this issue, you know, something's happened. So the demand has gone up, and it's, you know, it's rather than restricting to office hours, where they'd ring the office, you know, when it was open, they're contacted at night. You know, I'm saying to my staff, just turn your phone off after 5, unless it's something important or you're expecting a call. But there are, you know, we've adapted our services. You know, we know there's some clients who work, you know, during the week. So we've provided some Saturday services, you know, where they, you know, they can come into our, you know, and take some debt advice, and we've also provided some night surgeries as well. So if people do need that help, we can provide that.
Yeah, Alison.
I think expectations, particularly going back to the service level, have changed substantially. I think the speed at which people want things to happen clients expect things to be done very, very quickly, and unfortunately I think the pandemic has shown us that third parties and government organisations haven't been able to cope, and they have slowed down the process. So that's one of the big issues that we're having to deal with at the moment, is to manage client expectations around probate registry, land registry, courts, etc. But yes, I mean, we live in a world where I can pick my phone up when I'm lying in bed and buy something off Amazon and it arrives the next morning. So that's what people expect these days, and you know, that's why it's so interesting to hear about a lot of the innovation and tech solutions, because I think we all need to be in a position where we're able to respond to that client who's lying in bed thinking, I can't stand this, I need to get a divorce, I want to speak to someone now. And how do we do that? And it's a challenge for all of us.
Daniel?
I think Alison said exactly what I would have said really there. I think with the advent of technology as well, and like we said, as Salim said, with smartphones as well, there is that demand, and it's 24/7, 365. An example, I mean, we get live chats 24/7, 365. All, you know, we're talking 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, whether it will be for someone looking for a divorce.
Is this client-facing web chat?
Client-facing web chat, and you know, if you're not doing that, why not type of scenario? We use the third party to actually manage that for us, so that all goes through a scripting process. But it still comes in via email, like, and Alison's completely right. People, they want it there and then, and that is only going to become more prevalent over the next number of years, and that will probably move on to packaged services. If you look at the younger generation that are coming through now, they're not really going to want to speak to a solicitor if they're buying a house, or there's still that fear of engaging with a solicitor.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at the number of leads that come through websites, it's a formidable amount, because people still have that fear about picking up the phone and thinking that it is going to cost them.
So when did you introduce your web chat service, and I suppose, what proportion of sort of people are interacting that way? Yeah.
The live chat's been probably working efficiently now for 3 to 4 years, and we generate around 300 to 350 leads a week off the website, and I would say probably about 50 of them are via live chat.
Yeah.
And that's across the board. But we're talking commercial work as well. We're not talking private client work. You'd be amazed at what actually gets generated.
And I suppose I'm just asking this because some people might be sitting here thinking, oh, I don't do that, that might be an interesting thing. And did you always effectively outsource it, or did you start off that chat with in-house and then the volume?
Completely, yeah. We started in-house with the inbound client capture team, as we call them, and it just became too much for them to handle. The interface was popping up all the time, and we ended up going to a third-party provider. We provided all the scripts with them. They've got our SLAs, so they know exactly what they're doing, and effectively what we're trying to do is to get that client on the telephone as quick as we can.
Yeah.
And so they're dealing with a human, and it works great.
I mean, it's interesting, actually, just probably a shout out in terms of this area. For the SRA has an ethics helpline, which is there for solicitors to phone up and talk through if they have problems or they're not sure what to do about something. And actually that has a web chat service. And again, that's been really popular. One, because it's sort of, you can do it in your own time. But also there's quite a barrier sometimes to someone phoning up our ethics helpline to say, I'm having a problem or I'm not sure about something. And sometimes it feels more comfortable for some people to go through that way. So a question I wanted to pick up, and it's, I suppose, a point you made, Daniel, and others have made, is there's an expectation that they get excellent 24/7 service. It's a brilliant job, but then there's also an expectation that the cost is, down as low as it can be. How do you square that expectation? Because obviously, better service potentially costs money, or does it? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? How maybe Alison, what do you do to try and square that circle and control expectations of your clients?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, and I think it depends a lot of it on the area of work as well. We found, particularly in our litigation department, which is where you always get all the random inquiries that no one else knows what to do with, we get an awful lot of inquiries that just will go through a whole process and say, well, I didn't think I'd have to pay. So there is that sort of learning that I think a lot of people have grown up in a world where there was legal aid, and some of us in this room, like me, are old enough to remember where you could just get free advice about anything on a green form. And there are people who've never been to a solicitor, just a lot of them think that's still the way. So there's a bit of education there. But then the rest of it is really about getting them talking, as you say, engaging them on the telephone, telling them exactly what they're getting for the money that they're going to pay, explaining the service, explaining what needs to be done. There's always going to be a proportion of people who are going to just buy on the cheapest price. Our view is that we're not necessarily going to want them as clients anyway, so we want people who actually understand the service we're going to provide and are prepared to pay for that, and most of them are once they understand what they're getting.
Anyone else on the panel got thoughts on that cost point?
Yeah, sure. I think the important thing is to set the expectations right from the outset. I think that's one of the major issues for law firms generally. Quite a lot don't make it clear what kind of service the client can expect. If you set those expectations right at the beginning, then the client is satisfied, and that's shown in the reviews that we see. For firms that actually do that actively. But also, there's technology out there. There is tech that law firms can employ, which will enable them to be responsive 24/7, and it's not that expensive in order to be able to do that. It's just a matter for law firms learning to engage and actually take the stuff on.
You're nodding, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, I see inquiries that come in via the various channels that we utilise, and people will quote, I've seen, can you beat a price that I've seen on Quickie Divorce for £49 plus VAT?
Right, I've not been on that website.
no,
if my wife is watching.
But that, like I was saying, that they're some of the barriers that you are dealing with, and but you're right, you have to choose, is that the type of client that you want? Is it going to be profitable for you to be able to do that type of work? So it is difficult out there, and with the advent of digital, it just makes it even more difficult in terms of conversion.
Now, and in terms of those expectations, if someone's not paying for a legal service, does that change their expectations, or do you think actually it's very similar expectations?
No, similar expectations. So I used to work in private practice, and the level of expectation hasn't changed. In fact, it's probably more, because they see it as free. They try and ring you. Whereas in private practice, they know that if there's a phone call, there might be a charge. So I think the expectations is difficult to manage when it's free. Just on the point of consumers, so we only help in select areas of law. But when it's it's an area that we don't deal with, for example, family law, we do say to the clients, you need to do your research, you need to ring the different firms, you do need to ask for a quote, there will be an expense, and we try and explain to them that way. How they go about contacting the firms, I'm not sure, but that's something that all our teams say. You need to go out and just do a price, just get a quote.
Yeah. And just going back to costs, because it's the type of question people often ask, does anyone have any views on it? Are fixed fees the way forward, or is there still an argument for on the meter? What are people's views on that?
I think increasingly fixed costs are what clients want because they want certainty. But I think that there's a lot of people out there doing pricing training and showing you how actually to. And pricing training is not about how much it costs; it's about how you sell it to someone. And I think the biggest barrier you have internally with that is making sure people know that a fixed fee is not a cheap fee, it's not a discount, but it's providing a client with certainty as to what they're going to pay so that they can budget for it, and either pay you up front or pay you in instalments, and then at the end they walk away, rather than them being hammered with an enormous bill that they weren't expecting.
Salim, you were nodding your head earlier. Yeah, what do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, a fixed fee doesn't necessarily mean it's a cheap fee, but it gives the person certainty. I think that's absolutely crucial. It's where people feel at the end of the case, hold on, this fee is nothing like what I expected at the outset. That's where you start getting problems and the complaints the SRA or the legal ombudsman. If people have that clarity right from the outset, you'll get far fewer problems as a result.
It'd be interesting to know, Salim, off your platform, how many times cost is a key word within the reviews?
It's not as often as you would think, actually. The majority of the complaints that we see are to do with service levels. It's to do with responsiveness. The person didn't reply to my emails, didn't reply on the phone. They were very, very slow. I nearly lost the property I was trying to purchase because they were incredibly slow. And that's as a result of the law firm not keeping the client keeping contact, keeping that regular connection. If they actually improved the communication, you'd have far less problems as a result.
And it goes back to your point, doesn't it, Alison? It's often a stress purchase, and so already someone's in a stressful situation. They don't necessarily feel in control. It's something people hopefully aren't using a solicitor that often in their life. So if you don't have that ongoing communication, actually, I can understand why that's one of the things that really gets to people and leads to that dysfunctional relationship. So we picked it up in the first panel session a little bit. Why do we think, or maybe you don't agree, but do we think the legal sector's behind from a sort of customer service point of view compared to some other sectors and in terms of innovation? Is that fair? And I suppose, what can we do about that? Does anyone want to kick off on that one? Salim, yeah?
Sure. I do think that the legal sector is a little bit behind the curve in terms of innovation. It may be partly to do with the way that lawyers, when they enter the profession, are sort of taught to think. That there's this worry about failure, which was touched on in the first session. What will happen if something goes wrong? It's interesting, when I launched Review Solicitors, some of the comments that I saw in the Law Society Gazette were, appalling, saying, allowing clients to leave reviews was the final nail in the coffin for the legal sector, apparently. But
we're still here. We're not in the coffin. Yeah.
But that is the way that the world is going, and people, just need to realise that people expect to be able to find reviews. If they can't see them, they'll go to somewhere where they can ascertain, is this the right firm or the right lawyer for me?
And people sometimes, I don't think, are given credit for, they are sophisticated consumers. So TripAdvisor, if you use it, you don't necessarily look at the very worst review or the very best reviews, do you? You do approach that with a slightly cynical mindset, but it does give you a sense of a picture. But also, you don't necessarily just rely on TripAdvisor or review sites. Is that your experience?
I'd be dubious of a firm that only had 5-star reviews, because I would think that there's some kind of manipulation going on because every firm has the occasional review that is negative. But what I would look for from an outside perspective is, when things don't go right, how does the law firm respond? Are they aggressive in their response, or are they sympathetic and they want to try and make things right? For me, I would go to a firm that had, on our site, a score that was in the high 4s, rather than a firm that was, supposedly 5 out of 5.
Yeah, we were speaking, Salim and I were speaking earlier, we use Review Solicitors. We also use Google Reviews, and we also use Trustpilot, Google Reviews and Trustpilot, excuse me. And I've started getting a number of emails recently from an agency that are basically saying to me, "Hi Dan, do you want us to get rid of your poor reviews for you?"
Right.
I'm just like, and it's just, it amazes me. So there are...
Is it that guy I met in the pub earlier?
Which is amazing, and some firms will fall foul of that. And from a digital perspective, that could be dire, because you can look at the reviews in terms of it ties in with your search engine optimization and the scoring that Google gives you. Google when you ascertain a Google review, what we tend to find is we get a lot of reviews left from the other side. So case in point about talking about residential conveyancing, it may be the other side leaving your report. You're nodding your head here, the other side are basically saying you're holding it up. Salim's site and Trustpilot, if you tell them that's not your client and you can prove it's your client, they remove that negative review. Whereas Google, you don't even bother, because they say, well, it gives a holistic review of the service that you actually provide.
Right.
When it's not, and that causes big issues, and that can have a negative effect. Because I'm no different. I brought home insurance on Monday. I used USwitch, but I didn't use the 2 or 3 top. I went a bit further down because I felt a bit more comfortable and a bit more trusted on the other brands that were available to me. So as a legal profession, we're no different as well.
Yeah. Alison, what do you think on that?
That's really interesting to hear, just in the terms of buying a service, that you're not going for the one at the top and you wouldn't be looking for the 5-star. I can't remember who it was at something many years ago who told me that if you run a restaurant, you put the wine with the biggest profit margin second on the wine list, because nobody goes for the one at the top, but they don't want the expensive one, so they think that makes them look a bit better if they have the second one down.
When I was a student, it was the cheapest wine, and then as I become more sophisticated,
I do think we are somewhat behind other professions and other industries. I think, as you say, it's that fear factor of if you put yourself out there on a site, people are going to leave negative stuff. We've had it, we've been hit with it, we get negative reviews excuse me, from people who we don't know who they are, and they're not clients, and they've left a name and they're not in our client database anywhere. But we also get negative reviews from litigants in person on the other side in family proceedings, saying, you're awful, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. Well, actually, what that means to us is we've actually done too good a job for their ex-partner, and that's quite a tricky one to deal with as well. So I think we've all got that little bit of a fear factor if we don't want to really put ourselves out there to be shot down. And we need to try and learn to live with that, and then, as you say, it's how you deal with it, and how you respond online. If you look at people like was it Virgin Trains or whatever, the instant response, we're really sorry this happened, how can we help you sort it out, contact us direct. And I've had complaints where I've actually had people come back to me at the end and say, I'm so glad the way you dealt with this complaint, I'm so impressed by it that actually I'm going to refer people to you.
Yeah,
he fell off the chair.
That's turning a loss into a win, definitely. Now, what about you? Is the legal sector a bit behind in terms of that side of things?
Yeah, completely. I echo what Alison's saying in terms of that. Google reviews are one of the worst, I will say. So, not only is it the other side, we've got private landlords, just writing about our solicitors. It's also disgruntled volunteers who've actually been in contact with us, and rather than actually go through any sort of complaints process, they just go on to Google reviews. So you are vulnerable. You're extremely vulnerable as soon as you get out there. And I think we probably are worried, aren't we, as a profession, and we've got got a line to hold. So yeah.
Okay, great. And I'm going to give the first call out for questions from the audience. Do we have any initial questions? I mean, it took, 2 goes last time. So, yes, the man in the pink jumper has delivered again, so he's definitely getting the prize.
Yeah, you can tell me not to go again if you want.
No. We haven't got any other panel sessions, so you've won.
Actually, I was just going to ask you, Ben, you mentioned at the start about the SRA doing a pilot on reviews.
Yep.
And I think you said that it hadn't been taken up very well by law firms, or did you?
No, the pilots, we've got more than 70 law firms and 8 comparison sites involved, but one, we're still running it, so we want more firms involved. But I think that's the point I was making is comparison websites haven't really taken off in the legal sector in the way they have in other sectors. Consumers still don't go to comparison websites in large numbers. And one of the challenges is, and a lot of the research out there shows, that if people are looking for a sign of quality, it's quite hard for people to shop around and choose, because the best bet they often have is asking a friend or somebody, have you ever used a solicitor? And that can work, but not everyone has a friend who's used a solicitor for a certain problem anytime soon. So that's one of the reasons we're doing that pilot. But sorry, that was a very long answer. So yeah, back to your question.
No, it's okay, because that kind of answers it in a way, because that was my misunderstanding. I thought you was talking about reviews and the legal sector not buying into people leaving reviews, not comparison websites. So
yeah. So I think, and as I say, there are comparison websites out there. It is growing, but it is. Celine, you chip in here. It is slower, perhaps, than in other sectors.
Although interesting, we've been sort of watching our visitor numbers growing, especially during this pandemic, where people couldn't see a solicitor in person. The reviews became more important. So we had 4 million visitors to the site last year. So people looking for a lawyer or to confirm that they were making the right choice of firm before instructing. So it's definitely, I think as more and more of these comparison tools are getting more content, it's becoming more useful to people. But even if somebody's recommended a certain firm, it's so easy just to type that name in on a smartphone and just see what comes up.
Yeah, no, really good. Yep. Any other questions? Yes, thank you.
Hi, Interested in the thoughts of the panel on how firms can deal with or review and reconcile feedback coming from consumers. So I'm sure some firms have very formal voice of customer programs. They solicit feedback from customers. Others are, I guess, more reliant on Google review solicitors, Trustpilot, etc. There's always a danger in sort of acknowledging or rewarding the person that screams the loudest. But how do you reconcile what's coming in and make sort of sensible decisions on what to change, what to improve, and what to ignore?
Really good question.
Sure.
Salim, do you want to go first?
In our questionnaires, we have a section where people can put adjectives to describe their experience. So if they've given 5 stars, they can choose what elements of the service did they actually like. But if they've written a 1-star review, it changes those adjectives quite considerably, and they can choose, less favourable things. But it's really useful from the law firm's perspective to be able to see, well, when we get things right, what do people really like about what we do? And when things aren't so good, how could we learn? How can we improve as a firm? The one thing I would say is the majority of firms actually on our site get generally very favourable reviews. It's a relatively small number. So it's, what we've said to firms is you don't really have so much to worry about. The worry is if you don't ask your client base to leave feedback on a site like Review Solicitors or Google Reviews, etc., because the only people who will go on there are the people who are very unhappy with the service, and it's not representative at all of what the service the firm actually provides.
Daniel, what do you think?
Very, very similar to what Salim has mentioned there. We use our case management system to actively push out to ask for reviews from Salim's platform, but also via Google. We're now moving into a point where we're actually going to introduce that across the board in terms of having our own client feedback, which obviously clearly we need to do, but looking at the algorithm that comes back in off that, looking at the answers, and then saying, well, would you also be prepared to leave a review on Review Solicitors, for example? That gives us a greater benchmark across the whole of the firm to be able to pick up anything. To answer the question, I suppose, really, what we tend to do is the review will come. If it's a poor review, if it's a 1-star, let's say, for example, it will go straight to the head of the department. And
have you identified potentially problems in certain parts of your business through that?
Well, and certain individuals as well in some respects. So it's actually you can actually use it to highlight people that might need training in certain areas, or you pick up on the way that they're dealing with certain aspects of the case. And that's been vital.
Yeah.
Very, very good exercise.
Alison?
We've always asked clients for feedback at the end of a case, and I know that what you're supposed to do is to ask for them during the case as well, which we're not so good at. And I have to confess that we were slightly in the dark ages before COVID, because one of the things that had been on our list for a very, very long time was having an online questionnaire, and that actually prompted us to bring it to the top of the list and sort it out. What we found, though, is that there are an awful lot of people out there as clients who actually don't want to do online questionnaires, so they want to fill in a piece of paper, so we're having to run a dual system, which is not particularly efficient at the moment, so we're looking at ways to improve that. But you have to obviously take into account the fact that if a client is unhappy, they will shout about it. If a client is happy, they're less likely to shout about it. So you have to take it with a pinch of salt as well if you get more negatives that and deal with those issues. And I say use it as training, use it to identify where there are problems in the organisation. But we also we get a lot of clients who just send very nice emails to members of our team telling them how wonderful they are, and we make sure they're shared, and we make sure our board see those as well. We make sure that we shout about them internally and reward people for them. And we go back to clients and ask for testimonials, and we have a bank of testimonials which we then share on social media regularly to say this is what our clients say about us, and use all of that, and obviously on our website as well. So there's a dual purpose to it, isn't there? There's collecting so you know what's going on, and there's also collecting the good stuff so that you can use that as almost another source of people buying from referrals.
No, it's good to hear, because in the first session we had the importance of celebrating failure, so I'm pleased we've balanced that out with, we do need to celebrate success as well. What about you, Naim? What do you think?
So I've redesigned our client feedback journey. So in the past, at the end of a case, CSQ goes out, and the return rate isn't great on those, or those that do return, or those returning clients who are really happy with the service. So I was concerned that there's a lot of audience that we don't know what the service is like. So we've redesigned it partly due to the pandemic, where we weren't receiving those CSQs at all, even from regulars. So we have a system now where we have somebody ringing the clients. So every couple of months there's some deadlines. So the caseworker is supposed to say this case finished whenever, give it a couple of months, and then we ring the client and see what the journey's like. We found it's been really positive. We've had some really good feedback from clients that are just emailing, and so similar to Alison, we use that for marketing purposes. So on our social media, it goes out. A lot of them, we do get a lot of thank you cards that come in, so they go out. For me, it's just really highlighting the service to see if there's anything that we can do differently. So I analyse what feedback comes in, and if something is a problem, we can change it.
Just going back to the questioner, if there's a microphone, I suppose, one, if you have any response to that, but how do you do it within, I presume you work in a firm, yeah?
I have to confess I'm an ex-lawyer or recovering lawyer. I've heard the term before. I actually work for a technology company within the legal sector. And I was just reflecting earlier in a quick conversation with Sally, actually, how when I was in practice, the thoughts and feelings of the client, of the consumer were sort of so far from our mind. But now with the organisation that I work for, it almost drives everything that we do. And it's really difficult to start and to get your head around and to work through feedback, I guess, systematically in a way that will sort of help you prioritise what you need to do and what's important against, I guess, other business priorities. But it is so important, particularly in this digital age where people are writing all sorts of things online.
Yeah.
So probably doesn't quite answer your question, I'm sorry.
No, that's really interesting. Have we got any other questions? Gentleman at the front.
Thanks. It's really just to share with you a thought that was prompted by discussion of the review materials. Over the years, not often, but just now and again, I've talked to people, sometimes new clients, sometimes just people generally, who say, oh, we were really charged a lot of money by such and such a firm. I paid it, but I wouldn't go to them again, or in so many words, that's what they've said. And it's always made me conscious that some people don't feel strongly enough to give that feedback, but clearly they are, in a sense, potentially dangerous individuals in the sense that they could comment to others about the firm. So really it's just to see what are your thoughts about trying to get feedback from people who may not be actually dissatisfied but just feel that it wasn't the outcome in full that they'd expected. Okay,
so how do you capture the feedback from, let's call it, the lukewarm clients? Salim first and then Daniel.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the way that we do it, we're integrated with like 90% of case management firms. So any firm that uses like Clio, Leap, SOS and so on, they can actually automatically, through the case management system, contact their entire client base, asking them to leave reviews. Obviously for the vast majority of clients, they're generally happy with the experience that is there. If somebody does write a negative review, though, it is an opportunity. We give the opportunity to the firm to be able to respond, but also to try and sort out the matter. So if the matter is then resolved, the person who wrote the review can actually edit what they've written. So it's far better that it's resolved at this stage rather than the person is silently, very annoyed about what has happened and is just spreading, their negative view of the firm to as many people as they, without the firm being able to ever resolve it. I think having that greater openness and transparency, that's what law firm clients want to see.
And I know we're talking about a lot of the conversation is based around the digital evolution, but I still think, and we have run a couple of programs very successfully with our commercial clients, is actually going out and seeing them. So we run regularly, every 12 to 18 months, a client review program whereby we look at the top billing commercial clients in this instance I'm talking about, and the non-client partner, i.e. the person who is responsible for that relationship, does not go out and see that client. So we have a standardised form whereby there'll be a set number of questions. The non-client partner does not attend the meeting. It'll be one of the other partners, and they sit down maybe for an hour and they look at all the service that we have provided to them.
And is it someone else, so they're slightly more divorced
Correct.
relationship?
Yeah, correct. And we've had instances whereby we may have nearly lost a commercial client, but because of that meeting, we've managed to pull it back because they didn't like a particular individual, but they didn't want to say that to the relationship, or the relationship partner, because that individual was part of that team. So that's still, that face-to-face contact is still very, very key. At the end of the day, people still buy people. You know, whether it's digital or not, it's all about people.
It's prompted that, has anyone used mystery customers either on the panel or in the audience?
Yeah.
Okay, let's get the mic to this man at the back, who I believe you work on the marketing side of law firms. So you've used mystery customers. How's that worked for you?
Yeah, generally really good. The general feedback, Daniel mentioned about the first touch point, our reception and call answering was excellent. They were answered really quickly, and generally the pass through to the relevant inquiry handler in each department quickly. Where it got a little bit less sketchy was when it got to department, and we've recognised that as a bit of a training need. We're looking to train up a group of about 8 to 10 of our kind of more junior colleagues who are dealing with inquiries within departments, so they can kind of recognise opportunities or kind of just deal with those inquiries more effectively. But across the piece, our mystery shopping exercise was really positive when we got back.
Alison, were you going to say something?
Yeah, we did it for several years. One of the telephone companies used to run one, and we always agreed to take part in it. And they would have 3 specific queries that they would ring a number of firms about, and then they would produce you a report as to what had gone on, and then they would also show you how you sat in comparison with other firms. And I was always actually delighted at the outcome, which I think when you're working within a firm and when customer service is part of your role, you tend to focus on what we're not doing right, but actually it's really good to have something to share with your team, to say this is all the things you are doing right, and you got 9 out of 10 for this, this and this, and I think it can be very beneficial, as well as trying to find the people it doesn't work for, or the things that are going wrong. It's also a big morale boost for your staff.
Have we got any other questions from the floor? Well, otherwise, I was going to ask you a question now, and that is, obviously, technology and tech solutions aren't going to work for everyone, and you deal with quite a lot of elderly clients or people who may not have easy access actually to technology or be digitally literate. Can tech still help those people through you, or what's your view on where things are? It's obviously not the silver bullet alone, but what's your view on that?
Technology can really help. Obviously with the pandemic, we moved all our services to remotely. So we found that actually it's the other side. So it's the DWP, it's the tribunal service, not actually corresponding with us in email. They've got letters that have been sent to an office that's closed. So it's really difficult. It has been difficult for some of the clients, like you mentioned, that they don't have access to smartphones. But we found actually that there has been quite a lot of clients who've got a next door neighbour, who's got a family member who's come in to visit the weekend, and just take a simple picture and just WhatsApp our team. So it will be, and I think it can be a really useful tool. But it's a big caveat that it doesn't apply to everybody. That there are people, we've reopened the centre because there are local communities that can't come in, that they just can't deal with the technology, even picking up a phone. They've got a phobia on that. So now they come in and see us and see a friendly face that they've seen for years. So it's really, it's catering to your audience and how you manage that. With the technology, we've reached the Liverpool City region, we've gone across to the Wirral, so we are expanding in terms of what we can do just because of technology, and some clients can access it.
Excellent. Rachel, you've got a question.
It's a question for the whole panel. How do you think the expectations of clients will evolve over the next, say, 5 years? Do you think we'll see new things coming through, new expectations, or do you think it will be a continuation of speed and accessibility, for instance?
I might just say one point, and then I'll come to the panel. I was, just before the pandemic, I did a series of focus groups with young people, and one of the groups was a group of ex-homeless young people who actually had, because they'd been homeless, actually had more experience of almost legal problems than perhaps equivalent people their age. And they were very up for tech solutions. What was interesting, they loved the idea of apps. They all wanted them to be free. And they basically said, there's no way I would ever pay for a legal app. It would, to get me in, it'd almost have to be you go through certain processes and then you might pay further down the line. But they were pretty savvy, but they were tech was definitely the way, and thinking, well, yeah, will that generation, when they, because most people use legal services later in their life. I'm going to come to the panel, but you're going to say something back on that.
Not long ago, and he said that his daughter specifically chose a firm of solicitors for her first conveyancing transaction because they had an app. So it's similar sort of experience when I've been talking to people.
Sort of, and I mean, I don't know, perhaps this is an incredible stereotype, but I think younger people are perhaps less comfortable on the phone, or at least from a first interaction, but very comfortable with tech. So, who wants to go first on Rachel's? How are consumers' expectations? What's your guess for how they might change over the next 5 years or so? Shall we get Alison? Do you want to go first?
I think we live in such a fast-moving world that knowing what they're going to be in 12 months is quite a challenge, isn't it? Because I'm really sad, I read a book when I was on holiday, which is something like Reimagining Legal Services, and some of you might have read it. It's written in almost like a novel about someone joining a law firm and how different it is. And what's interesting is it was written about 3 years ago, and a lot of what it was talking about has already happened. And this was someone's vision of 10, 20 years in the future, and actually it's nearly there now. I do think apps are, everybody of a certain generation, that's the first thing they look for, isn't it? We live in a society now where most people have grown up with a keyboard rather than a pen. Most people have grown up looking at a screen rather than people, and as you say, they don't pick up the phone, they text, they WhatsApp, they do whatever else they do. We do an awful lot of advertising through social media, and not just advertising, but just having a big social media presence, and that drives an awful lot of work to us through Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and everywhere else. And I do think that that's where the business is going to come from. But then it's going back to what you were talking about this morning, in then how you provide the service as well. People are going to expect something where they press a button and it happens, and how we deal with that. And then you have to also go back to the point that was made this morning, that at the end of the day it is all about people. We can't do what we do without people and having a relationship with our clients, and I don't think we're going to lose that. I think people will always still buy from people and expect to be dealt with by people, but it's how we put the other stuff around it to make the service as quick and user-friendly as possible, or whatever our clients need or want, that's going to be the difference.
Daniel?
Certainly, I think apps, they're here to stay, aren't they? They're not going to go. They're not going to go away. If all of us took our phones out of our pockets now, you'd just be scrolling and you'd see 20 apps on each of your screen. We have an app at the moment. We're only utilising it for real estate residential, and we're using it more as an onboarding process. It has the biometric facility within it to deal with all the anti-money laundering and the ID process. We're only giving it to select individuals at the moment, whether you could deem them maybe more sophisticated, because we know they may be able to. I was at one of my son's football matches recently, and one of the granddads was there who looked to engage us, and he went, I didn't engage you because they wanted me to use an app. So that was quite interesting.
So
that was the reverse, because it may be a generation. Apps as well can also cause issues, because people are if it's tapping into your case management system and they're looking at key milestones, if they can see that you've not sent the contracts or you've not done that, it's actually generating more phone calls. So in some ways it can actually be a stumbling block. That's how I would pitch it. But I do think, the younger generation, I think one of us said it earlier, package services are going to be the way forward. It's just an expectation. It's not going away. It will happen.
Yeah. Salim?
I think firms, to stay competitive, are going to have to become more tech and marketing savvy. People expect sort of immediate results. They expect to be able to find the information that they want. And for firms, You know, they need to be able to, you know, let people know what they do, how good they are. Being able to differentiate yourself from, you know, 12,000 other law firms is difficult. You know, from a consumer's perspective, it's really hard to know which firm to choose for a particular legal matter. I do think things like reviews will continue to become a major point when people are choosing whether you're an SME or you're an individual, which firm to actually use. But I think tech makes it easier, to giving you more channels to be able to contact the firm. So, for example, one of the things you were talking about earlier about live chat, Dan, I think, you know, not everyone is comfortable talking to a solicitor on the telephone. Some people want other ways to be able to get in contact. And again, certain elements, though, are still going to be the same. For example, things like, I think, one of the points about elderly clients who may not be so tech savvy. I mean, one of the things we've tried to do is to cater that, you know, if you want to still use a paper questionnaire, you can do. You can just simply send it to us. We type it up, and it's put on there. So, you know, we tried to take all of that into account.
No.
Interestingly, when I was at Grace Manchester Law Centre, we worked with a local university to try and develop an app for, you know, for our clients. I don't know, obviously I've left since, but that was quite interesting because we had the university students telling us what they were looking for, you know, in terms of when they were loading an app and what kind of things they were doing. And we had some of our clients actually saying, what would be useful for you? How can they develop that? So it'd be interesting to see how far that project's moved on, but I do think apps are the way forward.
Have we got any other questions from the floor? Well, I've got a question. I suppose this is first targeted at you, Daniel, and you're obviously a reasonably big firm. You've got a marketing director, got a marketing function. But there might be some firms sitting here thinking, well, I'm not a marketing specialist, but I'm not big enough to employ a marketing specialist. Are there some sort of tips that even a small firm might be able to do, whether it's through use of social media, that they might want to consider?
Yeah, I would say it was funny, we were having a chat, just stood down here before, and people, I think, can really overcomplicate marketing. I've learned, you know, over the years that it isn't, shouldn't say it's not difficult, because I might do myself out of a job there, but, you know, strip it back and make it very simple, I would say. Go back to the basics. I think the first thing to look at is you've got to understand your brand, you've got to understand your market. They're obviously key. If you've got a niche, use that niche. If you've not got a website, clearly most firms do, but there are, Salim and I were saying that, you know, he's come across some firms that still don't have a website. Make a small investment into a website or a digital strategy, work with a small digital agency. You've got to be careful with what some of these agencies will try and sell you. You don't need to spend a huge, vast amount of your budget, but just getting on the social media platforms as well, getting some advice based around how do you deal with Twitter, how do you deal with Facebook, how do you deal with, we've just gone into, we were on Instagram, we've just gone on to TikTok, for example. You know, there wasn't many firms on TikTok. I know. I think we're only the second firm, I think, on TikTok. We've not done a great deal with it yet, but we're there. It's to engage with that audience. You know, maybe we're going to give it to the trainees just to say do something with it. But it's all about that engagement. But again, strip it back. Look at your basics. What are your strengths? Good old-fashioned advertising can still work.
And is that physical advertising or targeted advertising through social media?
Bit of both. I mean, we have a London office, and we had a new partner that joined us from a firm down there. She specialised in family law. She knows the Richmond and Twickenham area very well. They had a publication, Richmond magazine, and we created something called the Diary of a Divorce Lawyer. And for a reasonably inexpensive 6-month campaign, that generated 6 cases. And you can do the numbers off the back of that.
And that's all about, it's identifying where your key audience is.
Yeah.
You don't want to just fire out stuff to everyone and hope someone happens to be in there. You want to go to where the relevant audience
We tried TV, didn't work.
Yeah.
We did TV advertising, and very expensive. We had a sub-brand for personal injury. We did TV, absolute nothing. Absolutely nothing. So I think Salim probably did TV with quality,
We spent millions at Quality Solicitors in terms of marketing. But interestingly, when we looked at all the results of the different channels that we used, the stuff that was the most effective is where people are genuinely looking for a solicitor at that particular point in time. Rather than just general brand, it's actually, you know, being on, you know, so digital, pay-per-click, you know, where people, or anything where somebody's really, you know, motivated.
It's finding a sweet spot, isn't it, when they're at that moment?
I think PPC or pay-per-click, I think, is a great example. That's a good takeaway. You know, if I would say that it's depending on the niche area that you're going after. Pay-per-click is obviously sponsored ads, so you get to the top of page 1 of Google. It's the first 3 listings under before you get to the organic listings. And if you've got a good niche that you can go after, you can pay as minimum of the minimum bid is 8p. So you only pay when someone clicks on that advert. So if you have got a good niche, it's great, and you can turn it on, and it's very, very effective.
And you can see if it's working.
You can see if it's working.
If they don't click,
then it's not working. You know, the Google dashboard will give you a good digital agency will work with you on that, and you can target to, you know, geographic and demographic profiles.
Yeah. Okay, we've just got a few, I think 3 or 4 minutes left, so I'm going to get, it'd be lovely to have a question, not from me and from the floor, to finish us off. Yes, thank you, gentleman there.
Yeah, I guess this one's specifically for Daniel. We've been doing PPC for the last year or so and found it really successful. I just wanted to know, if someone's probably been doing it longer, what would you class as a good benchmark for your ROI?
Now you've got me on that.
Is this one we have to take outside?
This one we take out. Maybe it depends. I mean, we have a healthy budget.
Could you put it in a percentage?
Pardon?
In a percentage?
ROI in terms of the spend to what comes out of the back end?
Yeah, so generally when we're doing our kind of planning, we had a kind of, we'd look to at least get 5. To give you an idea, the PPC stuff's generally doing between 18 and 20, maybe a bit over 20% return.
Yeah, that's probably about right. I would have said 15%. We probably convert organically about 15% of all the leads that come through the website. The thing with PPC is, you're probably right, they're more genuine in some respect, because they're probably taking less time to get in touch with you, if that makes sense. So yeah, I would say, yeah, 15 to 20% is a good benchmark.
And the only reason I ask is because we're fairly new to it, and it felt like a good mark for us, but not a chance to kind of ask anyone else.
Yeah, no, I think you're on the right line.
Thank you.
There.
Well, thank you. And what we're going to do is, I think, similar to the last session, actually, maybe we'll start with Salim and go along. Just, I suppose, what's one point that either you haven't covered yet, or actually you have covered but think it's a really important message? What would you like to share with the audience as we finish up?
Yeah, I think most firms just need to not be scared of things like reviews. It's important to be open and transparent. It is the direction that the world is going in. If you're collecting feedback from your client base, generally the vast majority of that feedback is going to be positive, but it's about how you reply to a negative review that I think is really important. If it's replied to in the right way, it can actually work to your advantage.
No?
Yeah, for us, it's our client journey. So using that client feedback and actually using that to direct our services. So just, similar to, don't be afraid of that. If there is something that's wrong, you can address it quickly.
Awesome.
Similarly, I think it's about putting yourself in the client's position, understanding what the client wants, not what the lawyer wants. And I think in terms of, you asked about what would you do with marketing, I think it's really important that you have some people who aren't lawyers who are looking at that side of things, because they can actually see it as a layperson who would be buying the service, and they can see the other side, because we all like to write blogs full of case law and jargon that none of the people out there understand, and there's quite a big lesson to be learned by all of us in terms of talking plain English and making ourselves a purchase that clients want to buy.
Daniel?
It's, if you're not embracing digital, why not? I think the client journey is massively important, and looking to, as Alison just said then, content, social media channels, getting that out there, because people want to engage with you, and that will help hugely.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much to our panel. Let's see if we can match the round of applause to the first panel. Otherwise, it will be embarrassing that it will sound like a... We have got a decibelmeter, so we'll be using that as part of our feedback. But I mentioned beforehand that you will be getting emails about this event. Please let us know if it's useful for you. Please let us know also, is there anything we can improve? Different topics, different types of speakers, a new chair, whatever you want. It'll be really interesting to get that feedback. And I suppose that's the one thing we ask in return. The other thing, I suppose, just to flag up is Simon, who's at the back of the room, we're just doing some videos of people to get their views on both innovation but also what this event was about. And that's really useful for us to then be able to use to promote these events in the future, because we want to get out there. Now we're back in a 3D world. We want to get out there, different parts of the country, and talk to people and promote, you know, what you can do, big or small, in terms of innovation in legal services. And so that really helps us as well. But I think I've learned a lot today. I think we've had a really good questions on the floor, really great speakers. So I want to thank all our panellists. I also want to thank the team who've helped with the event. Catherine, Simon, Sarah, Jane, Matt, the sound guys. I think they've done a smashing job as well. And it's always the people behind the scenes who do all the hard work, and then I get on the stage and take the glory. So, no, but thank you very much. We're going to be around, I think, afterwards. Please stay. And I think we've got some food, haven't we, Catherine? I'm not promising food to people, yeah. So stay and have some food, and we'll be happy to chat to you. But otherwise, thank you very much, and have a good afternoon.